Hey folks, this is Jack McNeil Jr. with the Kentner Church of Christ. We've been looking at some facts of life that you might say are ungetoverable. There are things in this life that we just can't change, that things are just going to happen and they're going to be what they are no matter what. You might say they are what they are or it is what it is. And so there are just some facts of life we just can't change. So, we can't get over these things. We've looked at the idea that life isn't fair. The fact that not everybody has the same outcome. We may have equal opportunity, but we're still not even going to have equal outcome because life isn't fair. Another thing we looked at in another previous lesson is that you can't change history. You can't go back and undo or unsay those things that you said or that you did. If you notice, the last time we had a video, my hair was a little different than it is now. I can't go back in time and uncut my hair because, you can't change history. And that brings us to the next ungetoverable fact, and that is that that choices have consequences. Newton's law of motion states for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Well, the same is really true spiritually as well. And as we see in Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 and 8, there we're told, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man sows, that will he also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life." And so you're going to reap what you sow. If you sow to the Spirit, you're going to reap of the Spirit. If you sow to the flesh, you're going to reap corruption. Matthew chapter 15 and verse 19. Jesus says, "For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, theft, witness, blasphemies." And so you think about the choices we make. There are things that enter into our heart through the choices we make, and those evil things, they come out through the things we say and through the things we do. And so, there is not a choice that we make that doesn't first originate in the hearts. And so understanding that choices have consequences help us to measure our choices before we make them. Someone will oppose you for doing what is right. In 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 12, Paul warned Timothy that all those who would live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. When you do that which is right, when you choose to do that which is right, someone is going to oppose you. We have the axiom that there is no good deed that does not go unpunished. And so, there's some irony there, but there's also some truth in that. Spiritually, Jesus has told us that we as Christians are going to be opposed. Matthew chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. "Blessed are you when men shall persecute you and shall revile you and shall speak all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. For, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." And so when we choose to follow God and we choose to be a follower of Jesus Christ, we're going to face persecution. We're going to face some negative consequences or some negative actions toward us. John chapter 15, verse 19. Jesus said, "If you are of the world would love its own. Yet because you're not of the world, I chose you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you." And so understanding that we're going to be opposed for doing what is right will help us to prepare to do right regardless of the consequences. But we also we need to understand that our negative choices, the mistakes we make, they carry consequences. You choose to open up and drink that first alcoholic beverage. The consequence of that could be alcoholism and a destroyed liver, a destroyed life, a destroyed family, a destroyed marriage. That could be the consequence of that. And so we need to understand when we make that choice that, do I take this job over here that's going to force me to work every single Sunday so that I will never be able to attend worship service, or do I, do something else where I will be able to be not pulled away from God? So we need to always be thinking about those consequences. What is the next step, and the next step, and the next step, and the next possible consequence? So many times, especially when we were young, we made impetuous decisions, and that maybe have had lifelong consequences. Like, I had a friend that, made the choice to get behind the wheel of a car while he was intoxicated, and he was in a bad wreck. He was not killed. In fact, he was barely even injured. But his passenger, who was underage, and he was overage, and the passenger was underage, was killed in the wreck, and he was charged with initially with homicide, and so homicide, or by drunk driving homicide. Later, he was able to take a plea bargain to manslaughter, but it changed his life forever. He's never going to outlive that and get over that, and the consequences of that are going to follow him all of his life. And so we need to understand there are consequences for every choice that we make. So let's make sure that our choices are going to be those things that lead us closer to God, that help us to be better Christians, and not just now, but in the far future even. You think about Lot's choice to choose to live by Sodom. I think had he known the consequences of that choice, what was all going to happen, I don't think he would have made that choice. We need to consider that. And we need to always be thinking, what will help me do God's will? What will help me to live closer to Christ and live closer and model my life closer to the life of Christ? And so, hey, hope that this is helpful to you, and that you go out and make better choices. Have a wonderful day.